All right, well, we are here with best-selling author Lynn Cullen, author of Mrs. Poe, and Lynn has very generously accepted our invitation to be guest of honor and presenter at this year's 2022 Saturday Visitor Awards at the official party of the International Edgar Allan Poe Festival, the Black Cat Ball at Westminster Hall. Thank you so very much for joining me this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
And where are you? You're in Atlanta?
Yes.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. It's not too difficult a trip from Atlanta to Baltimore. We're really looking forward to hosting you here. Well, I'm sure you're asked pretty often about the genesis of your novel, but it's a wonderful book, and I encourage anybody out there who has not yet picked it up. Absolutely fascinating. Please tell us about Mrs. Poe and how you were inspired by Edgar Allan Poe.
Well, my story is a different one, and I imagine that stories having to do with Poe are oftentimes unusual. But I was not a Poe scholar. I didn't know anything more about Poe than your average high school student when this book came to me. And this book came to me, Mrs. Poe came to me under duress. This was back in maybe 2010. 2011, my husband had gotten encephalitis, and he was unemployed. This is during that big recession. I myself was sort of between books, and so it was really bad timing for him to get encephalitis, and it knocked him. He was in the hospital for about a week. He was unconscious for 2 days, and when he came out, they didn't know, how bad of a brain injury he'd have. Well, it turned out he could no longer read. He could barely follow a finger. Like, you see this in the medical shows, and they're testing some accident victim. If they could follow that, I always thought, what malarkey? Who can't do that? Well, my husband couldn't. He couldn't spell the most simple word backward, like cat or dog or it or whatever. It's all a matter of his attention span. He could not stay focused more than a nanosecond. So I brought him home from the hospital, got him in bed. I was exhausted and terrified because I didn't know how I was going to keep our family together, how I was going to support us. And so I was in this very office right here, and I was marching back and forth in front of these books thinking, how am I going to, what book am I going to write? How am I going to save us? And Poe popped in my head, which is really strange because, again, I was not a Poe expert, had hardly read anything beyond high school, but I just resonated, Poe. And so I ran to my computer, looked him up, and I thought, I kind of like that he's a underdog. I love writing about underdogs, but I tend to like to write about women underdogs. Those are my favorite underdogs. So I thought, well, I like him, but what about the women in his life? I didn't see much about Virginia. Not much is known about her, but I did notice that in 1845, the year of the Raven, he went from having everything, how the Raven brought him the fame he so craved. He needed the love that writing books and being accepted as a great writer would bring to him. So here he was riding high. He was the darling of New York's literary circles. They were doing plays about the Raven. Kids followed him on the streets, pretending like they were ravens, cawing and flapping their arms. But he lost it all in 1 year's time. In 1 year's time, he had moved to what is now the Bronx and was in that tiny, tiny little Poe cottage and was kicked out of the literary circles in New York. And I thought, what happened that 1 year's time? And I read about Frances Osgood and about their purported affair. And so I looked into her, and I read that she was a writer, at the time, there weren't all that many women writers. Hardly anybody made money at writing. Poe himself hardly made any money at writing, as you know. And here she was trying to support her family because her husband had left her. He was a painter, portrait painter, and he was always abandoning her, leaving her to her own devices. So she was trying to support herself with her writing, herself and her two daughters. And when I read about her struggle to support herself, just my skin tingled. I thought, I know you. And I just threw myself into writing that book, and it came pretty quickly. But I had to, go to New York a lot. My story from 1845 is mostly in New York, because that's where Poe lived at the time of the Raven and all. So it all came together, and all these little details just kept falling in my lap. The whole experience was so magical. And to this day, I just so love talking about Poe. So it all came to me, in a time of great need. And it turned out changing my life. It was a turning point in my writing career. And so I'm very grateful to Poe. And I should tell you, because oftentimes I forget to tell people, my husband is okay. It took him a couple of years, actually, but he started out, I remember he was bedbound because he had another infection from the hospital. And he said, Lynn, do you have anything I could read? And I remember thinking, oh gosh, he can't even read, but okay. And as a novelist, I have lots of novels. And so I just gave him various novels that I had. And he would start to talk about them. He talked about the characters, about the ending. And I thought, he's really reading. And reading is what put his brain together. So books have been, the magic in my life all along.
I think as a fellow reader, as a fellow lover of books, it does not shock me that reading would save someone's life and really bring you back to all of that. And then especially Poe. That was very, very fitting.
Yes, I can't believe the magic of Poe. The healing magic of Poe, which you wouldn't think, but
you imagine it would be the opposite way. Well, you mentioned sort of the strangeness that you're an excellent company. That is certainly our experience at Poe House, people who've dedicated our careers to this. And so I feel that deeply and identify with that deeply. So
I have to tell you something funny about the strangeness. I go to a lot of book clubs in people's homes, or, whatever, halls, different speaking places, whatever. And almost every time there's some kind of glitch, like some electrical thing won't work, lights or something, things will fall off the wall. So that never scared me. And it made me chuckle how every time I had an appearance, something, just a little off happened. And is always a great laugh, like when a picture would fall down off the wall. There's Poe,
He was following you. You were bringing it with you.
Yeah. I mean,
I love that.
I don't truly believe that, but it was a very bizarre coincidence.
In other discussions we've had in preparation for this year, you and I have discussed the power of Poe, how passionate readers and fans are about this iconic figure. Do you have any fun stories? What has been the reaction from the Poe world to your novel, barring the poltergeist that you seem to bring with you in your reading?
Well, I had no idea, since I wasn't a Poe scholar, just how tight the Poe world is and how people love Poe. I stole a little of his magic for my book, and it, catapulted my career into a bigger place, just being connected with Poe, because people love him. And that's why they would pick up my book just to learn more about him. But yes, I had an event just a week ago, and the woman there was just saying how much she loves Poe. I mean, almost everybody who comes up to talks to me about my book first tells me how much they love Poe. And it's fun to be part of this love for Poe. And to examine him was really interesting too, because he's the person that they're in love with. I contend is really different than the real man, and that was fun for me to research, and I can't wait to talk to scholars and things when I'm in Baltimore more about it. I always enjoy talking to people who have really made a life study of Poe, because I think he's not at all like the common thought of him. So, you know, in the long run, the joke is on Griswold and painting him like this, because I think people enjoy thinking of him as this dark and scary guy. It did not hurt his reputation in the long run. It made him. So that's so ironic, I think.
You will be our guest of honor and presenter at the Saturday Vister Awards this October, in honor recognizing a new generation of artists and writers inspired by Poe. And obviously, your work is a perfect embodiment of what we wish to recognize in this new generation of creators. So is there anything you especially enjoy about adaptations or original works inspired by Poe?
I do really love the research. So I can't predict what the next work would be, but there's so much about him that's unexplored, because we have gotten so hung up on this viewpoint of him as this dark and scary guy straight out of his novels. And I think the more that we know about him, the more fascinating.